Sequels, prequels, spin offs. Those words have been battered, exchanged, shared over and over again in discussions about Dragon Age the Veilguard and how disappointing the story turned out because Veilguard didn't do what was expected of it with regards its storytelling. And it just made me realize that a lot of the fandom don't really consider the difference between a sequel to a story and what happens when that takes place in a shared literary universe, and how those two things are very different, and why Veilguard falls into the latter and not the former. So walk with me a while, would you? And let's talk about why Dragon Age is not Mass Effect, because they fall on opposite sides of the divide. But before I jump right into the video, hello, I'm Noria, and I make videos exploring themes, characters, stories, and the narrative beats present across various media. TV shows, movies, anime, books, and video games. If that sounds like an eclectic haven for you, then consider checking out my other videos. And if you like what you see and hear, be sure to hit subscribe. If you're someone who likes watching others roleplay games and are a fan of video game playthroughs, then might I recommend my second channel, PS It's Noria. I will have it linked in the description box. And with that out of the way, let's talk definitions. Because before we start to deconstruct a word and what it means with regards a piece of media that we enjoy, it's best we at first recognize what the word actually means. Because you see, just because something follows a piece of work, i.e., Dragon Age 2, which came after Origins, it doesn't mean that DA2 is a sequel to Origins. Because by its very definition, sequels are meant to be a continuation of the story that was told previously in whatever work that they are following up on. To be an effective sequel is to pick up the threads of the previous story being told and run with it, often exploring similar themes or having a story come to its natural conclusion in the follow-up pieces of media that are made to that effect. Most sequels are also often seen all the way through by a singular writer or a spiritual successor of the writer, i.e., The Wheel of Time being a series that, after Robert Jordan passed his estate via his wife, gave permission for Brandon Sanderson to finish up the work, because Sanderson is a fan of Robert Jordan's work. And most importantly, had a clear understanding and vision of the characters and the world and the story that was being told in a way that he could bring it to a satisfying close. Now, are there fans of Robert Jordan who are convinced that Brandon Sanderson didn't land the ending? Of course there are. Art is something that is so personal and subjective that everyone would always have opinions about it. And often, we are all pretty valid with how we choose to interpret and read things because, I repeat, art is subjective. So, yes, there are fans who hate the parts of the series, the sequels, but the thing about passing on the torch to another writer to pick things up from where the previous writer stopped is that you have to, one, accept that writing and art in general, while subjective, is also personal to its creators. And so, therefore, the artist, and this can be a writer, a sculptor, an illustrator, or a game developer, the artist is always going to bring their personal perspective into the work of art. You cannot separate a person's personhood from the art they make. It's just you wasting your time and also depriving yourself of what makes art something that changes us, touches us, has us feeling emotions, negative or positive. Art is reactionary because of the people, the thoughts and opinions, the fears and hopes of those who create it and put it into whatever work they've shared with the recipient of the art. The people who think that art is in any way apolitical always make me smile because, sure thing, Jan, if you want to believe that this piece of art, made at a time when the world is going to hell in a basket and the creator is struggling with rent and having marital issues or dealing with the loss of a parent, is devoid of all that emotion and feeling because you've closed yourself off to whatever the message is that the artist is trying to pass along, that is your choice. It is a free world and you get to run with it if you want. But life isn't like that. And now you're wondering why I've wasted more than 5 minutes of your time yapping about Sanderson and Jordan when you just want to hear why I believe Dragon Age the Veilguard is not a sequel. Well, it's because I think that when people, Dragon Age fans, bring up comparisons between how Veilguard seems to be telling its story and Mass Effect, it makes me realize that a lot of fans are unaware of the fact that Dragon Age is, by virtue of the type of story it is, a series of events driven by different protagonists who exist in a shared literary universe. Mass Effect, the core trilogy at least, because that's what people often use as a basis for their comparison, is a series of games with a focus on a singular protagonist whose story spans 3 games. Each entry into the OG Mass Effect trilogy contributes and adds to the story. It is why Mass Effect 2 is a sequel to 1 and 3 is a sequel to 2 and 1. It is why the games build on each other and it's easy to do from a storytelling perspective because Shepard's story spans multiple years, not decades, years, and it's told across all 3 games, with the start, i.e. Mass Effect 1, being the discovery of the Reapers and their goal, and the end, i.e. Mass Effect 3, being about putting an end to the Reaper threat once and for all. Or, if you decided to choose the fuck it, I'm not listening to the manipulative child yap and I'm not making a choice, let the future generation make it, me, I'm out. Well, in that case, it's not ended once and for all after all. And you've made it someone else's problem. But whatever the case may be, you effectively wrap up Shepard's story. Dragon Age, unlike Mass Effect, is not a series that is built on that continuity that having a sequel grants a piece of art or media. Instead, it is more of a series of stories set within a shared universe, which in a latter press blog post titled Shared Universes, What They Are and Why They Work, Kat Weblin goes on to explain is what you get when two or more standalone stories canonically take place in the same exact world setting within the same continuity, which then means that these stories have the potential to influence each other and even have characters, settings, and plot points cross over and interact. And you see, it's the latter part of that explanation, I think, that has a lot of Dragon Age fans confused, and why a lot of the talking points, even beyond the fandom, to how people discuss and read or interpret this game, has ascribed sequel status to the Dragon Age franchise, when that has never been the way the story has been told. Now, am I going to pretend that I was ever a fly on the wall and to have an idea what the initial plans for the franchise were at the time of it being conceptualized? No. Who knows? Maybe the plan was initially for the stories within the universe to be sequels of each other, and then life happened. Like I said, I don't know that. But what we've gotten so far, sure, there might have been some interlapping between certain events and characters across the games. Hello, Morrigan and Isabella. However, Dragon Age as an entity has never been a sequel series. Shared universes might have similarities with sequels in part of their execution, but they are quite fundamentally different. There's more room for creators and artists to explore new threads and stories within a shared universe. And it creates quite the room if the stories being told are by different writers too. Because then there's a flexibility of not being exactly forced into one spot, because you're not literally following up with the story that came prior to it. What you're doing instead is creating your own story and situating it within the world. And because it's your story or a new story, you're allowed to let your creative wings fly. Now, Veilguard is where things got a tad bit tricky, because clearly, due to the lack of an actual conclusion to certain main events and story beats from Dragon Age Inquisition, the expectation from the fandom was that this story, beats, and plots would carry through in Veilguard. And from what I've heard, please note that I'm halfway through the second act of the game, some people felt satisfied with the conclusion, and some people absolutely hated it. And some are just not sure why Veilguard didn't just bring back the Inquisitor as the main character. To which I would like to repeat what has been my refrain for the entirety of this video so far. Dragon Age isn't a franchise made up of sequels. It is instead a collection of stories within a shared universe. And as such, each of these stories are driven by their own protagonists, whose story each game proceeds to tell, to varying degrees of acceptance by the fans. It is unfortunately something that has to be dealt with when consuming works with a shared universe. You will like certain books more than the others, some characters more than the others. And if there are different writers or playing within the universe, you will like some writers more than the others. And other fans would prefer the other writer. It is a fact of expected life in a shared universe experience. The reason why certain comic runs are loved and some are so fundamentally and loudly hated is because of the flexibility that a shared universe provides writers. That's the experience we get with this type of stories. Because you will never get the exact same flavor of story that you want again. Because what you're looking back on with fondness has been dropped. So a new story can be coaxed out of another corner of the universe. And if you are invested in that form of storytelling, if you're a fan of that, then you have to recognize it. And honestly, I think what captures this well is when you have one writer who's created a shared universe for their story. Because that's when you really understand the dichotomy of how you can absolutely love a series of books from that same writer in one corner of the world and then hate another book series in another corner of the world. I've seen it happen with Stephen King and the Dark Tower universe, Shannon Maguire with the Wayward Children universe, Lee Bardugo with the Grishaverse, where those who love the Shadow and Bone trilogy barely tolerate the Six of Crows duology, and those who love the Six of Crows duology are bored to tears with the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And the books in these universes are all written by the same author. Because yes, there are some people who don't love all of Sanderson's Cosmere books. And not everybody is happy with every single book in the realm of the Elderlings universe. The reason why I bring this up is because there's talks about how David Gader, for example, would have written a better story than what we've been given in Dragon Age the Veilguard. And when I see those comments, I always think, yes, maybe that could be true. Or it could be true that even if David Gader was the senior writer on Dragon Age the Veilguard, there would still be people who would not like what themes he chooses to explore and how he chooses to tell the story. Because it's not back in the part of the shared universe that is their preferred state. I remember the previous tangents I went on about Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson and the act of picking your successor to tell the rest of your story because you think the person you've chosen is the best in representing the ideas you've always found consistent with your own storytelling, and that they best understand the world you've created and the characters that inhabit that world. I told you it was a tangent, but I lied. Because that tangent applies to this conversation too. David Gader handed over the world to the writer he's worked with for quite some time in the same world. Someone he feels understands and can best capture said world and their characters. And that is Treek Weeks. And please, don't cap now and lie to my face telling me that you don't think Treek Weeks is a fantastically brilliant writer. They gave us Solus and Iron Bull and Morden Like, come on now. They wrote The Masked Empire and also contributed to Tevinter Nights. Like, just because you're personally upset or offended by certain literary choices they took doesn't mean you should fix your face to start lying to us. We both know you're capping. They're brilliant. But as I was saying, fans not loving every addition to or expansion of a shared universe is not new. Hell, fans actively loving parts of it and hating others is a part of life. If you've spent enough time in fandom spaces, you will know this for a fact. The K-drama series Answer Me, also called Reply, is a shared universe of stories that fans are quite divided about. There's the first in the series, Answer Me 1997 or Reply 1997. There's the great Chobongi or trash debate of Answer Me 1994. And the Take or Jongwan fan discourse of Answer Me 1988. And fans have their favorites in the three shows and one that they tolerate. And then a lot of fans have that one that they hate. I, just in case you could not guess, enjoy them all. 1997, however, would always be my absolute fave. But that's because Soinguk is Bae and Ongyunji owns my heart. But what I'm trying to say with this particular tangent is that this conflict has always been the same across different media when stories are set within a shared universe. It isn't something that only affects the Dragon Age franchise. The question you have to ask yourself, therefore, is, do you like shared universes and the strengths and weaknesses of the story set within that context? Or do you prefer more sequential storytelling as gotten in stories with proper sequels? Because I have seen the talk about the Kotaku article suggesting that Rook be Dragon Age's shepherd, and as much as I can see what they mean by that, I don't personally see it happening. Because Dragon Age and Mass Effect are fundamentally different types of storytelling that happen across different worlds. And I don't just mean this in the Dragon Age's fantasy and Mass Effect's science fiction type of way. I mean it in the former has its stories take place in a shared universe, and the latter core story structure is a sequel. They are both completely different types of worlds and universes, and such Rook can become the new shepherd, because that's not what Dragon Age has ever been about type of way. To claim otherwise is to have little ideas of why the stories are told the way they have been and why things pan out the way they do. And for those that are wondering, I think Veilguard is a story that is kind of part sequel that takes place in a shared universe. And that is why it's had so much debate and so much confusion. Now, I like sequels and I like stories set in a shared universe. I can see the strengths and weaknesses across board, and I like them both anyway. But that's just me personally. What about you? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button if you like what I've had to say or made you consider something new, and hit the dislike button if you found nothing to agree with me on in any of the things I've said. Both work for me, and like I always say, you decide exactly how you want to craft your engagement with content online, including mine, and that is fine. If, however, you did enjoy my video and would like to get others in on it, do consider sharing this. It helps me reach a wider audience, which helps my channel grow and is incredibly supportive of my content. Speaking of support, a huge thank you to my patrons who have been pretty damn instrumental in helping me keep the lights on. Thank you. If you would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, the link to do so is in the description box. I make new videos 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Whilst you wait for new content from me, do check out one of my videos, the one where I talk about what Dragon Age the Veilguard has to tell us and teach us about the end of the world, because I do think it speaks a lot to the psyche of the creators of the game. Or you can give my latest podcast type video a listen, where I and a group of friends chat about our early impressions of Dragon Age the Veilguard. Either is fine, really. Until next time, do remember though, obsessing over the things you love? Perfectly valid coping mechanism.